Thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor to be speaking on the occasion of Ambedkar's birth anniversary. I would like to dedicate this lecture to the memory of Nagaraju Koppula, who died 2 days ago of cancer while he was treated in Hyderabad. As some of you know, he was an exemplary Dalit journalist who struggled all his life to reach where he reached professionally. He got a job in the New Indian Express and was passionate about reporting. For someone who studied in Telugu medium all his life, he managed to acquire very quickly amazing skill for writing in English, and he made a name for himself in journalism, a field where Dalits are severely underrepresented. When I met Nagaraju for the first time 8 months ago, he told me his story. He's from a place near Bhadrachalam in Khammam district of Telangana, which is where I am doing fieldwork for my research. His family shifted to Sarapaka village to work as casual labor in ITC paper factory. ITC used to be an Imperial Tobacco Company. Now it stands as Indian Tobacco Company. It's a huge private corporation that manufactures not only cigarettes but also paper, packaging, agri-business products. It also has a chain of luxury hotels. So when Nagaraju's father went missing, his mother worked in ITC even as she was pregnant with Nagaraju. But then her contract was terminated and she had to do daily wage labor in agriculture to bring up her 4 children alone. And Nagaraju was the only one who pursued higher studies. It's a painful irony that the newspaper for which Nagaraju was working also terminated his contract as soon as they came to know about his cancer. Even before that, they apparently refused to grant him medical leave when he was feeling unwell. His journalist friends across castes, as well as Dalit activists, are now agitating against what they perceive as a case of caste discrimination by the management of the newspaper. I think this fight is important, but if we really want to get justice for Nagaraju, we should also try to determine the causes that led to his lung cancer. Given the fact that he was only 30 when he got sick, he was leading a healthy life, he never smoked. It's not without reasons that I mentioned the paper factory where his mother was working. Nagaraju lived in a Dalit colony just opposite ITC factory for more than 20 years. I have no way to prove a causal relation here, apart from the fact that during my fieldwork in that area, I did hear about other cases of cancers and lung diseases around the factory. It's now up to his lawyer friends to file a public interest litigation about ITC if they really want to investigate the link between industrial pollution and Nagaraju's death. It's important to determine responsibilities, not only for him. If there is a public health hazard, people have the right to know. Of course, ITC has powerful political supports. I think that the tobacco lobby still has good days ahead. The village I am based in for my study of caste relations is just a few kilometers away from Sarapaka, Nagaraju's native village. That village is dominated by Kammas, the powerful landowning caste on whom I did my doctoral research when I was in coastal Andhra. While my PhD was focused on the control mechanisms developed by dominant groups to suppress others from coming up, my postdoctoral research aims at looking at power relation from the bottom up with this focus on 2 oppressed groups, the Madigas, the Dalit caste to which Nagaraju belongs, and the Koyas, who are the main Adivasi group in Bhadrachalam tribal belt. The aim is to compare Dalits and Adivasis in relation to more powerful groups and to understand the strategies they develop to resist or subvert the processes of domination. Before I go into the details of what I found so far, I would like to make a more personal account of my encounter with caste in India since I came to this country. I spent my first year in India in Masuri Academy of Administration to teach, that's where I was teaching French. Interestingly, the first time I heard about Ambedkar in Masuri Academy was when a group of Dalit IAS officer trainees wanted to celebrate his birth anniversary a day like today. And there was a heated argument about upper caste officers who were not willing to attend the ceremony. I heard people criticizing them by saying that Ambedkar is not only a Dalit leader, but also the father of the Indian constitution, and therefore all Indians, irrespective of caste, should attend his anniversary, not only Dalits. I think this boycott of Ambedkar Jayanti by some upper caste officers was one of the rare incidents of open casteism I witnessed in the academy, because generally casteism is more subtle and difficult to grasp for an outsider. Ironically, today Ambedkarites face the opposite problem, which is the appropriation of Ambedkar by people and political parties who have absolutely nothing to do with his ideas, like the Hindu nationalists. Ambedkar was a fierce critic of Hinduism as he traced back the origins of caste to this religion. Though he was born a Hindu, he refused to die one and converted to Buddhism. So it's difficult to imagine how Hindutva followers of the RSS are now trying to claim the legacy of such a radical thinker. One explanation might be that they've never read Ambedkar. I started becoming familiar with his thoughts after meeting a Dalit lawyer in Guntur district where I was doing my PhD fieldwork. She asked me to accompany her to Chundur, where a trial was going on against the dominant Reddys accused of killing Dalits in that village in 1991. I guess she wanted me to hear a first-hand account of what caste atrocities mean. I did hear that account from a survivor of the massacre called Dhanraj. I have never forgotten his spine-chilling words, which I wrote down as my advocate friend was translating, as my Telugu was very poor at that time. And I would like to quote him now. The Reddys of Chundur always hated me because I was an assertive Mala. Once I had a fight with one of them who swore that he would kill me. But he was suffering from polio and was half paralyzed, so he couldn't do anything. On 6 August 1991, the police came to the Dalit hamlet to warn us that the Reddys were planning an attack against us and asked us to run away towards the paddy fields. It was a trap. The Reddys had bribed the police to tell us so and were waiting for us in the fields armed with axes. Pushed by my survival instinct, I could run for 4 hours under the hot sun. When the Reddys finally caught me, they had already massacred 5 Dalits. I had seen them do so. They started beating me up. After long minutes of torture, I pleaded them for water as it was unbearably hot. That's when they urinated in my mouth. Then they started digging a pit and told me that they were going to bury me alive. But they didn't want to do it themselves. They wanted the polio-affected Reddy to do it, as he had always wanted to kill me. Because of his disease, he had stayed back in the village. So my attackers went to bring him, leaving me under the surveillance of one of them. Since they had already broken my legs with axes, they knew I couldn't run away, so even the guy who was supposed to keep an eye on me went away to sit under the shade of a tree. I managed to roll down till the canal and let myself fall in it. The rapid flow took me away, and I was rescued by Mala women who covered me in a sari and put me in the train to Tenali. There I was admitted to the hospital. I was saved. In 2007, the Chundur Special Court sentenced 21 Reddys to life imprisonment and 35 to 1 year imprisonment. But last year, in April 2014, a division bench of the Andhra Pradesh High Court, headed by Justice Narasimha Reddy, cancelled the sentence for lack of evidence. I purposefully insisted on the surname of the judge not to miss the fact that he was also a Reddy. As students of law, you must be aware of the importance of a fair caste representation in every field, precisely to avoid this kind of systemic biases and prejudices. We need more Dalit judges. We also need more Dalit journalists. To come back to Nagaraju, he's one of the very few Madigas, I think the first one, who managed to get a job in an English newspaper. A few years ago, there was a survey on caste in Indian media made by CSDS, which showed that Dalits and Adivasis, who constitute 1/4 of the Indian population, had zero representation in the key posts in newspapers and TV channels in the country, while Hindu upper caste men, who are just 8% of the total population of India, hold over 70% of the decision-making posts and therefore decide on editorial policies across the news spectrum. At the national level, it's mostly Brahmins, but at the regional level, in a place like Andhra Pradesh or Telangana, the media are controlled by the dominant caste like Reddys and Kammas. For example, Ramoji Rao is a Kamma, and he owns both the Telugu newspaper Inadu and the multilingual channel ETV. Why does this matter? Because it affects the content and the way in which social issues are reported. Take the Karamchedu Massacre of 1985, where the perpetrators were Kamma landlords and the victims Madiga agricultural laborers. You can't expect Kamma-owned media to report objectively about these atrocities, especially at a time when the chief minister himself was a Kamma. It was NTR, Chandrababu Naidu's father-in-law and founder of the Telugu Desam Party. You also can't expect an administration dominated by upper caste to deal effectively with those situations. The only thing the district collector did at that time was to distribute food coupons to the Karamchedu survivors. That's why you also need Dalit IAS officers, and the role of caste-based reservations that Ambedkar inscribed in the Constitution is to ensure that. That doesn't mean that administrators should be working for the advancements of their own communities, but a fair representation of all sections of society is important to prevent bureaucratic partiality. You rarely see people who oppose reservation fighting for better government education, which would give equal opportunities to all. You can't oppose reservation and put your kids in elite English medium schools, private schools, where the vast majority of the population can never afford to go. You can't oppose reservation and then pay huge capitation fees to buy a seat in corporate engineering colleges. In Andhra, those colleges are completely dominated by Kammas who have transformed higher education into a big business. Kamma domination in various fields of Andhra Pradesh economy and society was one important reason behind the demand for a separate Telangana state. In fact, Ambedkar in his time was not in favor of linguistic states, precisely because he knew that it would serve the interest of the dominant caste. The creation of Telangana somehow broke Kamma hegemony, or at least confined it to the residual Andhra Pradesh state. But there is a sense of betrayal among Dalits and Adivasis who supported the Telangana movement. They are now under the domination of the local landowning castes, the Velamas and the Reddys, who are not only overrepresented in the Telangana Legislative Assembly, but control the economy. In the tribal area where I am conducting my new research project, 7 mandals have been transferred from Telangana to Andhra Pradesh because they will be submerged by the Polavaram Dam. Since irrigation from this dam will only benefit coastal Andhra, this administrative move was meant to avoid political opposition from the Telangana government, which would have had to deal with the rehabilitation and resettlement of the population displaced by the submergence without getting any benefit from the dam. This transfer was made unilaterally through the very first ordinance that the Prime Minister Modi passed just after coming to power, as might have been planned with his ally Chandrababu Naidu. But it's also true that Kesia, the Telangana Chief Minister, have given up those 7 tribal mandals without much protest, probably in exchange for Hyderabad, that the Andhra Chief Minister has accepted to leave since he now has grand plans for a new capital in his own state. Displacement due to Polavaram Dam will affect more than 300,000 people, mostly Adivasis and Dalits, who as usual pay the price for development without benefiting from it. The Adivasis living there are Kondaredis, who are categorized as particularly vulnerable tribal groups since their population is dangerously decreasing, but also Koyas and Gutti Koyas, who are displaced Adivasis from Chhattisgarh, many of whom victims of the Salvajudu militia that was created to crush the Maoists. I spent some time researching on the Gutti Koya issue in Telangana, but to understand their story fully, one needs to go to their villages back in Chhattisgarh, which was not possible for me at that particular point. So I am now focusing on the local Koyas, as well as the Dalits living in tribal areas. All the Madigas in the village I'm studying, all the Dalits are Madigas, and all the Madigas are landless, whereas the Koyas do own some land, even if no more than 5 acres per household. This is a scheduled area where tribal land is protected by the Constitution. The Land Transfer Regulation, also known as 1970 Act, prevents non-tribal from buying land in this area. But in my case study, Kammas and Reddis, who are just 12% of the village population, possess 53% of the land, which they bought before the protective law was enacted. The entire village is controlled by one extremely wealthy Mr. Rao, a 90-year-old Kamma landlord and political leader who settled in this village in the 1940s. For 35 years, he monopolized the Sarpanch seat because there were no Panchayat elections, so his authority could not be challenged. Even now that the village posts are reserved for ST candidates, the Koyas who want to get elected have to support the Telugu Desam Party as he tells them to do. Rao owns 150 acres of land, which is 30 times more than the average Koya. His son works as a neurosurgeon in the United States, where he owns 6 hospitals and a private jet to fly between them. Rao is so influential that the villagers need to approach him if they want to work as casual labor in ITC paper factory. But he will help only those who submit to his diktats and vote for the TDP. When I speak of help here, it's not even about, it's only about getting casual work, not permanent jobs. In ITC, those are totally out of reach for most of the villagers. I've been told by job applicants that these days one has to pay up to 10 lakhs to get a permanent job in the factory. The management and the unions put the blame on each other regarding this corruption. The unions say that the money goes to the management, and the management says that the unions take the money and in exchange recommend people for jobs. What is happening most probably is that this money doesn't go directly to the pockets of the managers, but then they turn a blind eye on the corruption of the unions in exchange for social peace. By letting them money, they ensure that there will be no strikes and no demand for wage rise. So this whole idea of industrialization that creates employment has to be qualified by showing what kind of employment, for whom, and at which cost. What I found out so far in my comparison between Adivasis and Dalits in the village near the factory is that the Koyas are somehow more autonomous and therefore able to resist the Kama landlord's domination because they own some forest land which sustain their livelihood through shifting cultivation. They vote for whomever they want. They don't need to obey Rao's instruction because they are not working for him as farm coolies and they are not interested in ITC jobs anyway. They say that it stinks inside the factory, and it's true, the foul smell that comes out of the chimneys reaches even Bhadrachalam. The Madigas, because they are landless, are much more dependent on the Kama landlord for daily wage labor in his fields, as well as casual labor in the paper factory. As coolies in agriculture, they earn 150 rupees per day, and in industry, they get 200, but they have to pay the auto rickshaw 50 rupees up and down to go to the factory, so it's the same. The correlation between caste and class is particularly strong here. It's difficult to subvert caste oppression when you are trapped in such exploitative class relation, and vice versa. The main problem faced by the Koyas is that their lands are now under the threat of the factory's expansion. The Telangana Chief Minister has recently sanctioned an extension worth 3,000 crores for ITC. The company wants to expand this particular unit for two reasons. The availability of water and coal near Bhadrachalam. We have the Godavari River and also the Singareni coal mines. But also the fact that there has been no strike in this factory for the last 30 years, unlike in its West Bengal unit where the workers are much more combative. It's not that the workers here are more submissive, it's just that social peace can be bought, as I have explained earlier. ITC is using tribal land to grow eucalyptus trees that provide wood to make paper, even though eucalyptus plantations are ecologically unsustainable. There is a case now pending in the High Court because ITC has illegally encroached 100 acres of forest land for eucalyptus plantations. Those 100 acres of forest were given to ITC under Chandrababu Naidu's regime, ignoring the law against tribal land alienation. It's a bitter irony that the same chief minister now targets small woodcutters to the extent of allowing extrajudicial killings, as it happened last week in Chittoor district, when thousands of acres of forest are offered to industries and mining companies at the cost of Adivasi livelihoods, including the 4,000 hectares of reserve forest that will be submerged by Polavaram Dam. One positive development is that there are now Koya lawyers in Bhadrachalam who are actively fighting for the implementation of the land transfer regulation to protect tribal land rights in the scheduled areas. Again, you see the importance of representation for Adivasis and Dalits. Of course, there are many people across castes, even across borders, who have taken up their cause, but they should be considered as allies, not as representatives. Those allies are important to build solidarities beyond particular identities, and I am sure Ambedkar would have agreed with the words of the Australian Aboriginal artist Lila Watson. If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. I also strongly believe that nobody is free until all are free, and that we are all untouchable until no one is, which is the slogan of a recent campaign for Dalit rights. Thank you so much for your attention, and Jai Bharat.